Okay. Yeah.
We are. You okay? Okay.
Yes.
So, hello everyone and welcome. I'm Anaïs Godard with Calyx Press, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Julia Alvarez, one of the most beloved and influential writers of our time. I'm going to read um, a quick bio of Julia right here. That's in her book. Julia Alvarez left the Dominican Republic for the United States in 1960 at the age of 10. She is the author of numerous works of fiction, non-fiction, and poetry, including her beloved first novel, How the Garcia Girls Lost Their Accent, and In the Time of the Butterflies, which was selected by the National Endowment for the Arts for its Big Read program. She was the subject of an American Masters documentary, Julia Alvarez, A Life Reimagined, on PBS, and was awarded the National Medal of Arts by President Barack Obama. She lives in Vermont.
Mhm.
Today, I'm going to put you right here, Julia, next to Atwood and Ogawa. You're in good company for
Oh,
everybody to
good.
see.
Wow.
And today we're here to celebrate your newest poetry collection, Visitations, the first collection of poem in more than 20 years. As someone who came to the United States as an immigrant and who writes in a language that was not my first, I found this collection deeply moving. And it feels like a conversation across generations, across language, and across time itself, really. So, Julia, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. How do I pronounce it? Anais?
Anaïs, yes.
Anais. Okay. See,
Hmm.
yes, yes. Thank you. And thank you to Calyx because I don't know if you know this, back when I was just, you know, a migrant poet, as I call myself, little jobs here and there, trying to get a place to get published. And of course, back then, multicultural voices, voices from other places of the world did not find mainstream publishers or magazines willing to publish you. But Calyx did some of my first poems ever, and I've remained very grateful to it as someone that was there from the very beginning,
Yeah.
and paying attention, leaning in and listening.
And we're still very proud of that.
Yes.
So, in your book, Visitations, you write in the afterword that poetry was your first love, your first literary love. And I was wondering, reading it, what made you come back to it after 20 years? What was it in that collection um, that told you this is the moment to return to poetry right now?
Oh, wow. Um, so many, such a root system of answers to that question, but
We
um,
have time.
it is my first love. It is. It isn't something that I left behind and then picked up now 20 years later. It's always there, between novels, in the middle of novels, a hard moment, a joyful moment. I find that I go to I go to poetry because poetry is all of literature, all of the arts, I think, stir the mystery in you. But I think poetry is closest to the silence. It's abuts the silence that the mystery is most present in. It's just the way I heard Seamus Heaney say that poetry is what can't be put into words. But it's somehow through the rhythm, through the incantation, through the images, through the repetitions, it captures something that can't be put into words. And so, I return to it. And as I get closer and more companionable with the big silence, which I'm closing in on. Um, the what at the end of Hamlet he says, and the rest is silence. The silence that surrounds you, that becomes more and more permeable as you become old. And so many people have passed over. There's so many voices from there. It beckons to you. You know more people there that you love than really are remain with you. And so you it feels like the expression of the moment. And then another part of it is the politics, the world we're living in that's so baffling and things seem to be falling apart. And for me, poetry is the string in that labyrinth. It's the thing that gives me a through line and reminds me of the core things, the essential things that are most important.
When you sit down, do you know, how do you know whether a story belongs to a poem or a memoir or a novel?
Sometimes they come with their DNA already. Yeah, for you to express it, you just have the feeling. The Sometimes with poetry, it's an incantatory phrase. It's a collection of words. It's an image that you explore. But sometimes in the midst of exploring it, a story comes out of it. So that sometimes you begin in poetry and you might end up with a story. Sometimes, as with when I was writing in The Time of the Butterflies, to capture the voices of each of the sisters, the four protagonists in the novel, I wrote poems in each one's voice
Mm,
um, as a way to, because I needed the voices to be different and to express that personality of that particular Mirabai sister. And poetry helped me achieve that, hear it. So it's something it's not a set thing. Sometimes it remains what it originally declared itself as, and sometimes it was just, the trumpet call that led you in to another narrative world that might be a story or a novel or a memoir piece.
I hear a lot of intuition, like following
Oh
your heart,
yeah.
really. Yes.
It's a mess.
Hmm.
Back when I was publishing and got published in Calyx and would attend writers' conferences with my notebook, eager to know, how it was done by the real writers. I thought the real writers just get a notebook and they start at the beginning and they know what they're doing. And sure, they'll go through and correct a few things. But my process always felt so messy. I
Hmm.
didn't know. I had to go by, as you say, the intuition. And sometimes my my ego, myself would get in the way and mislead me. And then rereading it, I heard that something was off. So it is that messy process. And come to find out, now that I know some of those big writers that give lectures, that their process is just as messy and their anguish is just as deep and their moments of self-doubt are just as troubling and their belief that I'll never write another book. All of that comes with the territory because we're dealing with mysteries here. We're
Yeah.
dealing with something bigger than ourselves, and we're trying to contain it in a small personality and self, and with our limited abilities. And so we have to walk carefully and listen.
Yes.
Yeah.
Um, there was something very striking to me in these collections is also how you talk about the in-between culture, the in-between languages. That do you feel yourself still after all this year writing between languages? Do you know what I'm
Well,
talking about? Like the in
yes.
between Spanish and English, the in between like the Dominican Republic and the American culture, all this thing that is so unique to immigrants, really.
Right, right. Well, I think it's in different times of my life, it's not a set thing, it's not a set amount I can measure. And at different times in my life, in different situations, one or another gains ascendancy. It's like those lava lamps, you never
Mhm.
know what form it's going to take, but
Yep.
both are in there,
Mhm.
both and then other cultures that have come into me through things I've read, things I've heard, people I've loved, and those are part of me. But those initial, the way I was wired at the cellular level was this island culture, was this language that is the one that taught me how to listen and gave me a groundwork syntax so that though I think the language that, as we say in Spanish, la lengua que yo domino, though the verb is wrong because I don't dominate it. I learned to ride the wild horse and not get thrown off it. The language that I've learned to craft and study is English, but the Spanish is so much how I speak my English. Yeah.
Mhm.
I sometimes say I go to poetry because it's a way of speaking Spanish and English. It's a more musical language.
Yeah,
It's a
I
more,
resonate completely with that. Yeah.
yes, yeah, yeah. So I think they're always there. And, in certain situations, people would always try to catch me at, well, there's got to be one in a sentence. They say, well, what are you dreaming? That was the trick question. And I would think, well, if I'm dreaming of my papi and he comes in the dream, he'll speak to me in Spanish. And if it's the chair of my department and he comes into my dream, he speaks to me in English. It's not, they don't get, they're both there. So
Do
yeah,
you still write in Spanish?
not really, but sometimes when I'm, re when I'm, when I have a character or line, only the Spanish word
Okay.
can capture, or the rhythm. The words might be in English, but the rhythm and the way that the words are in a sentence have so much to do with Spanish. So it's a kind of enmeshing that's it's hard to separate the different fibers of what gets made through that weave.
Yeah. Do you, that's a question about language. What do you feel is gained or maybe is lost when you write in a language that is not your childhood language?
Oh, that's a I mean, the whole novel, people thought that how the Garcia girls lost their accents. My first novel was about my saying that you had to lose your accent, but it really was through story. One of the meditations in it is what is lost and what is gained when you
Yeah.
lose your accent. What are what happens there? I think I think there's a loss of a real sense of belongingness to the language, a real sense of you've gone you've hit bottom in
Hmm.
the language. With English, it's more like you dive down and you touch it and you touch the language, but you're not grounded there. So it's a different, it's a different relationship to it. I think there's more doubt in English, that you're not quite sure you've said it all because something of the Spanish is not there. And but now that you're such a hybrid, if you were to write only in Spanish, something of that other fullness, would also be lost. So you have this you have to it's a more capacious landscape, which makes it more of a challenge, but it also makes it, I don't know, just a bigger,
Richer.
richer, yeah, bigger world, a bigger world. What is lost in a sense, when I go to the DR and I have monolingual friends or relatives, the fact that it's not something I can put in their hands and say, you know, this is a part of me, this is something. Um, so it's like it's like you. I often in an essay I expressed it as that you've learned that you tell stories of your culture and your and that first whirl in the Sultan's court to be accepted and not and not beheaded, to go to the story of Scheherazade in the Sultan's court. But a is that kind of a soul drain?
Yes.
You left instead of being for that culture, you know.
Yeah.
So there's that sense of you and it's also sad that if you get published and people make a big deal of you in the United States of America, then you go back and it's that sort of you know, a sense of inferiority having been a colony that of oh, that's you're the privileged writer because
Yes.
they have paid attention to you. Um, but that separates you.
Hmm.
And you're not, that's not what you want, you
It's that
know.
in between again.
Yeah, yeah. Which is a rich space too.
Yes,
'Cause
of course.
we can be a bridge,
Hmm.
we can hold the things together. Um, but if you let go of one, you kill a part of yourself. If you cut off your roots, what happens? You
There is
die.
a reformation of the identity. When I left France, I was a bit older than you. I was almost 17, and given I didn't leave because of a dictatorship, I still left um, fleeing some demons. I think a lot of immigrants do that.
Oh
We have that
yeah.
in common. And I moved to London, and I didn't know how to speak English, and I had to teach English through to myself through literature. And I think for me, it gave me wings in a way. It gave me, like you said, a richer way to reinvent myself, more words, another culture, and another way to say things. So another way to tell my story. And
Wow.
I feel a lot of that in your in visitations. I feel a lot of that bridge, that transition that you're talking about, which is very relatable. Yeah.
That's such a good point because that is very true that a freedom comes, especially for a woman of my generation, but it's still going on, where we were not to, you kept the stories entre familia.
Hmm.
Women didn't have a public presence. That was not something that was done. And certain things you didn't talk about if you were a nice girl from a nice family, all of those impositions. And by writing in English, you were liberated
Hmm.
because it was not accessible to the censors, until translations got you in trouble when it came back. But yes, it gained a certain kind of freedom that that wouldn't have been possible. But I think writing poetry was also a way to gain that freedom because the oral culture that I came from, poetry and recitations, of course, were very common, but people didn't read poetry, and so it was. I had written about a lot of things, and my first book was a book of poems before Garcia Girls, but they were poetry books, and they were just decorative. People had them on their
Yeah.
coffee table. But when I wrote a novel and it got translated and it was stories, and that got me in trouble. Yeah.
Yeah, I was struck by how narrative your poems are. They were like almost little like stories, each of them. They were so vivid, and I could see and feel everything right away, which was amazing. Sometimes I absolutely adore poetry, but sometimes I feel like I'm standing a bit outside of it. And maybe that's the books you're talking about, the one you put on the coffee table that
Yeah.
don't read as easily, I would say, are not as approachable. For me, in visitation, personally, the emotional center was the four girls. And there is a line in there now that we're talking about poetry that stopped me, and the line is, "A poem allows us to look at things from all sides at once." And I really loved that. Can you talk about that idea a little bit more?
Even when you look at it visually on a page, it's um, it's got all this white space. So it's almost like you can circle visually. You can circle the object and see it from all directions. But because a poem, doesn't have all the encumbrances, which are also richnesses of points of view. So you're not within a character only or
Mhm.
within a set time. There's a kind of openness to it, an openness that allows many, many points of view to read that poem and come up with something, a different point of view on it. So
Mm,
I think it allows for that, it doesn't trap you in that kind of set character and the way that you try in a novel, say, to capture the reader into this character and this situation so that you feel that you're living it. You know,
mhm.
the way we live, it's enmeshed in all the paraphernalia and details and drama and plot of our daily lives or something that's happening. So it's hard to step back and get that perspective, which I feel is what a poem allows for, you know?
I'm seeing those globes as you're describing. You know the globes with the snow globes. I'm
Oh,
seeing
yeah.
that and a memory, like listening to you, like that's what I imagine a poem to be, like
Yeah, yeah.
moments like that. Do you think that poetry can hold contradictions easier than other form can?
Well, I think the best art allows for that perplexity and complexity. You know, it doesn't flatten things out.
Hmm.
Um, if it flattens it out in terms of, let's say, a novel about one character only, so you feel like, well, that's just one character. The language of the writer, the way that the novel is structured, the lyricism or lack thereof, the down to how the paragraphs move on the page, the sentences, is that it's the writer allowing for that other perspective to enter. I think complexity has to be part of art, or you get propaganda, or you get advertising, but you don't get art. It
Hmm.
allows for the full, what in Zorba the Greek, the full catastrophe of not just being human. I mean, there are novels, there are poems from the perspective of the natural world, animals, otherworldly things. So it allows for that.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's just poetry. I think it's all good art, you
Yeah.
know.
And we need it right now, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah,
More
when
than
we want
ever.
to flatten things out.
Um,
Yeah.
Coming back to that, actually, to today, I felt Visitations was very timely, especially with in regards to the politic of Pivot. The in the story you revisit the shape of dictatorship, of exile, of displacement. Um, is that contemporary resonance something that you were conscious of when you decided to put out the collection, or is it simply a lens through which I'm reading the poems?
Well, I think in the re in the editing and revising it with my editor, with John Freeman at Knopf, the final editor I have for the collection, that when we got to the end, that last poem was not there. I walked through the house turning off lights, and I said, John, I feel like this collection that there has to be a certain level of awareness of the times we're living in. And I want to end with this poem because I feel like it's a poem that Milosz, the wonderful Polish poet, said that he that he didn't think a poem should necessarily, or even that it would do a poem good to be outright political and polemical, but that poetry that sinks below a certain level of awareness of its time is not useful to a reader. If you're, let's say, in Nazi Germany and writing these floral, beautiful poems that aren't aware or capture some of the zeitgeist that you're living through. You've really created a bubble with
Hmm.
your art. and bubble art is like gated communities. They just don't let enough of life in. Only a certain demographic or privileged group. So you want it to be not that you're necessarily going to write about this bigger world, but in what you're writing, that bigger world needs to be reflected. And I and as to why, did I mean to address the contemporary moment? I think the fact that I'm writing poems about surviving a dictatorship means that at subliminal level, I am I am trying to I'm trying to understand and make meaning of the moment I'm living at. That stuff has been called up
Hmm.
by being in the moment we're living in and seeing in this country that was supposedly the refuge, the very same thing we fled here, 60 years
Happening again.
later. Yeah, right. So I think your intuition, your unconscious, the things that come up for you that you feel an urgency to write about have very much to do if you're living an open-eyed, open-hearted life with what's happening around you. How
Hmm.
can it not, you know?
Um, Something else that I wanted to talk about with visitations is how the way you use ordinary objects and the way they become vessels for memory. I'm thinking about the clocks, Papi's clocks. I'm thinking about the bathrobes, the photograph, the Russian dolls. And the more I love these kind of things. I studied linguistics and semiotics, so you're talking about subliminal. I love looking at meanings, the layers, you know. Um, and so I was wondering, I wonder if the objects trigger the poems for you, or the idea is there, and then it's a symbolic that comes later, you know?
Oh, the chicken and egg
Yep.
question. I think that um, if you look with careful and surrendered attention to anything in the world, it has it speaks to you. There's a wonderful poem by Gabriela Mistral called La Contadora, the storyteller, and it's so moving because it's this it's this woman and she walks through life and all the things are trying to tell her stories that she trying to tell her stories and wanting her to tell their story. And, she walks by a rock and the rock is telling the story. And she walks by a river and she walks by an old man. And the whole world is telling stories. And this is, I think, what an artist does. It's there for all of us. An artist hears it, hears it. And so a lot of times, objects, an object from childhood. You open it up, and it's like Proust's Madeleine,
Hmm.
a taste, a cookie, and the whole four-volume Remembrance of Things Past come and flood in. And so it's these little, details that can sometimes hold so much of your life and what you remember. And we live our lives through our senses. It's it's later brought into the office managers, you know, file cabinets in your brain, and something is recorded with its meaning and your childhood and so forth. But it originally entered through something you smelled, you
Hmm.
know, um, a gift you were given, the softness of the red bathrobe, the the grandfather and the silverware,
Yeah.
and balancing and just remembering that image and then listening to it, that it really can tell a story about the difficult ways in which those people that were the adults in the dictatorship that I was growing up with kept a balance between their terror and their dissidence and their any moment being maybe snatched away by the secret police, kept that in balance with delight with the children, with making them believe in a magical world, with making them believe in that, the dining room table could be a circus, with the silverware being trapeze artists. That's a great achievement.
That's to me, the levity, the beauty in the tragedy is just the thing that gets me every time. Finding those little moments in tragedy, oh, it's just so beautiful, so beautiful.
And that is complexity, right? I mean,
Yes,
that is
absolutely.
that is not just a horrible done at time.
Mm-hmm.
They managed to keep a little area of light and
Mm-hmm.
and uh, and hopefulness, however temporary, because it
Mm-hmm.
flees at the end of the poem. It crashes the whole sculpture, but for a moment, they're all leaning in, listening, and the impossible has happened. That balance.
Ah, yes. Another balance. The title poem Visitation left me thinking of how the people that leave us, that we lose, never really entirely leave us. They keep resurfacing in gesture. I think you say pappy in a, a dog, the sad eye of a dog giving you his paw, expressions, stories, and habits. Do you do you feel that your own understanding of loss and remembrance has changed over the years, as you got older?
I definitely think so. As a matter of fact, my friend, a wonderful writer, Angie Cruz, a Dominican American writer, asked me about the poem Waiting for My Father to Pick Me Up at the Library. She said, Julia, would you have been able to write that poem 10 years ago? And it wasn't a question I was expecting from her. And I said, you're right. I couldn't have written that 10 years ago. It's a different perspective. It's, as I said earlier, you're closer to that silence, that separation between the worlds of those alive and those who are not, who are in spirit form and maybe you just want to call them memories, but that the film between the worlds is thinner and more porous. So you are hearing and seeing maybe more in depth. Uh, you're seeing like your parents or grandparents or people from the past in ways that you weren't able to see them before because you had to sometimes you had to release yourself from them so you could fly. You had to leave them, but you had to cut it off. You had to have this straight leave, forward movement. And now with age and time, you see, you understand maybe a little more, forgive a lot more, you know um and it's not regret in the sense of if only I hadn't if only I had known more, because that's that's not going to do you any good, and you have to live your life, you know in, with
To
what
learn.
you have yeah, at your disposal. But you do see more. There's this African American activist who marched with Martin Luther King, Ruby Sales, and she was talking about old age. She said, "Oh, old age, you're tired, your eyesight is going, your hearing is going, your bones hurt. But where I sit on my front porch, I have hindsight, I have foresight, and I have insight, and that's 360 degrees."
Mhm.
And there we go again to a poem allows you to look at all things at once,
Yes.
gives you that perspective that you have that larger vision, if you've been paying attention.
And you can listen better. Yeah.
Yeah.
Many readers, I feel, when they finish your collection, will want to call their family, their parents, their siblings. I know I did. Um,
Oh, that's fun. That's the best reaction.
yeah, it
Yeah.
was very much. Um, what conversation do you hope readers may have after they close the book?
Well, I think that when when a work is really works, it's that somehow through that connection, like the grandfather at the kids' table, getting them all inside that magic, and they believe. They have this moment of hope, of seeing something impossible happen. That literature, art stirs the mystery in you when you connect with it, and that stirring that makes things possible for you. You've experienced a visitation, you know, by when you get moved by work, a poem,
Mhm.
a painting, a piece of music, and then that spirit isn't just to be held and trapped in; it's to be released in what is the way that you want to release it. It can't be calling your mother. It can't be, oh, I remember a visitation, this ghost that is coming to me, this memory, this object that I'm gonna is resonant for me. Why? Why? Let me listen. Let me, that it gets circulated. It doesn't have an end stop, or it's just static. That it keeps getting circulated, and I think, I mean, was it Shelley said that poets are the unacknowledged, sort of uh, the unacknowledged, I don't know, leaders of the world. That wasn't the word he used, but that somehow that kind of spirit stirring and connecting us is deeply transformative and transgressive.
Hmm. Everything you're saying is, I'm on the edge of tears. It's so beautiful.
Oh,
Um, the collection also celebrates women. I felt the power of women, the power of gathering together, sisterhood, mothers, daughters, neighbors. Um, Looking back um, at your career, do you feel that women's communities have played a role or have helped you
oh.
make it possible for you? Yeah.
I think before I found, sort of a critical mass of other, let's say, Dominican immigrants that I connected with before multiculturalism came feminism. And my first groups of support were women's groups. We had a women's writing group at Syracuse. We had a traditional, creative writing program. And gosh, yes, all the writers there that were the teachers, the professors were all male, but we started a women's writing group. Having sisters, having three sisters, they were my first audience. They were the ones that listened first. And so I think it was critical. And to feel that, when I first started writing, I thought because all my teachers, what we had read were mostly the male authors, and they were writing about, the Homeric wars, or Milton about heaven and hell, or about, great campaigns or exciting adventures, about male heroes. I thought I had to write at that kind of important level, And I remember the breakthrough that I had was I gotten a writer's a residency at a writer's retreat, and I was so stuck because I was trying to write something important, and that's I was trying to write like an important white male, with a background that I didn't have and a voice I didn't have. And while I was doing that, we had to stay in our rooms and couldn't disturb the other writers. I heard the vacuum outside my door, and I went out wanted to start a conversation and get away from the demons at the writing table. And she said, shh. And it was the woman that cleaned all the parts of the retreat. And she said, come on down. I went down to her with her to the kitchen where the staff was having a coffee break. And I was sitting there and they were talking about cleaning the mansion. The cook was talking about what she was making. And I heard my mother and the tias talking about, how they were going to make the sofrito, gossiping as they, ironed, making our clothes. And I started hearing their voices and I went upstairs and I started writing my first group of poems, which was that are in my voice, and it was called the housekeeping poems.
The magic happened.
Yes, I heard the voice, so it was women's voices that which hadn't been legitimized. That was not that was considered like that's why so many writers or
That
many
was not
writers
important, right?
it was
That's
not
not the.
important. Yeah. And that's why George Eliot took on the name George Eliot. Because if
Hmm.
she published Mary Ann Evans, maybe people wouldn't have taken her seriously.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, it was a breakthrough. And it just happened that at the same moment that this was happening for me, the women's movement was exploding, and there were, I don't know what year Calyx was founded, but there were, you know, magazines and journals.
57, I think. I don't want to make a
Wow.
mistake. No, no, no. No, we just
I
celebrated our 50th anniversary. So
Yeah,
no,
it was
what
in
am
the
75, 76?
75.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, yes. When I would have started writing the housekeeping poems. But it's just that there were suddenly you had people that were affirming instead of sort of gaslighting you, that you're not really writing literature. That those are trivialities. Those are, not worthy of literature. They were saying, no, our bodies, ourselves, our voices
Yeah.
are wonderful, our history, her story, and they're valid, and we're listening, and we need this. And we
Hmm.
had Adrian Rich and other wonderful writers creating a language and you know,
Opening doors for writers.
opening
Yeah, yeah.
doors, right?
Hmm. It's still, I feel, well, it's much better for sure than it was back then, but it's still a challenge, I feel, for women compared to men today. And I'm wondering if women are still censoring their voices and trying to tell story. And I think because I can relate to this story, even in my generation, trying to be something that I'm not when I'm telling the story and really having to dig down and be like, strip all of that and be you on the page, finding that authenticity. Because I think women probably from the youngest age, even the young generation. I see my children, they are 5, but already see the difference between boys and girls and the gender roles that are, even if it's so much better, they are
Oh,
still gender roles affecting them. So I think for women writer, there is really still to this day a real work that needs to be done on top of the craft to trust yourself and to be confident as a writer to be able to be authentic, fully authentic on the page, if that makes sense.
patriarchy doesn't go away
Mm-mm.
because a law is passed, or some progress has been made. I mean, we see still the differential in how much women earn an hour as compared to men. We still see that the brunt, that's maybe not the best word because we don't want it to be like a torture, but that they bear the heavier load
Mm-hmm.
of the mothering and of balancing that with a career, for whatever, even with great partners. The patriarchy is there, and it's part of the wiring that is still embedded, systemic in our
Yes.
culture. So of course,
Conditioned.
yeah, right. It's like even if we close the door, it's like a gas that comes in to the door. We're not even aware of it sometimes, you
Absolutely.
know. And so I think it's so it's why people would say, well, do we really need, a Calyx that really highlights women's voices? Because aren't we post, that kind of world? It's what they said when Obama got elected. We're in a post-racial nation. Whoa, look at what's happened. It was there. It was biding its time. And I think we always have to be vigilant when there
Hmm.
have been these deep-seated, centuries old, not just in this
Million
continent.
years. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. There's something we have to be vigilant and aware of of that, not just out there, but embedded in us,
In our writing.
in
Yes.
our writing, in our souls, in our
Hmm.
sense of ourselves. Yeah.
What advice would you give emerging writers, female writers, trying to find their place in today's literary landscape?
I think what we've been talking about, to really listen to yourself and trust yourself. And know that, like, no two people have the same fingerprint. What your particular fingerprint, voice, combination of personality, experience, spirit has to offer is like none other. And that's the one, be yourself, because everyone else has taken that expression, to be that self. But we all get lost. I'm the kind of person that if I don't have a very good voice, maybe, or very good training. But when I am singing in a choir, I'll try to, I'm so easily wanting to captured by the voice of whoever's singing next to me. And as writers and artists, we're porous. That's part of our gift. But it also means that we can get a lot of
Influenced, yeah.
influence. And so I think it's really critical to find yourself a community. You know, a women's writing group is a really, and many writing groups, whether you want to or not, many of them are female uh, dominant, because maybe we know we need these communities. To find communities like those that can affirm, the importance of our voices and what we have to say, and to be, not just to receive from it, but also to be a presence there, supporting it. And, that's why the places like Calyx have survived, that it has survived. How much it has struggled says how far we
Hmm.
have to go, that the challenge is so big still, but also how important it is that people, that we still seek it, that we still need it.
Yes. And I don't know. I assume you probably had experiences in your early career before you made it big, um, where you had a pushback from the publishing and the editorial world. What 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 would you tell women who are told that no one wants to read what they're writing or that it's not interesting?
Well, the best revenge or the best rebellion is to keep writing. I remember, I mean, as we were saying, it gets, you're influenced by these things, and the height of, being recognized as a writer was, oh my goodness, if you could have something published in the New Yorker, oh my goodness, that would be huge. And I remember sending in a first little sort of memoir piece about my Dominican American families, which would later become the seed of the novel, How the Garcia Girls Lost Their Access, and getting this editorial letter saying that they weren't interested in sociological pieces. I thought, oh, if the characters are Dominicans and they're going through
It's
immigrant situation, they belong in sociology, they're not literature. And that was, oh, a writing conference that I went to by a very important writer that I very much admired. I was writing everything down, and that he was saying, and he said something like, no writer can ever truly, no poet, no one can ever be a poet if in a language that they didn't first say mama in.
Ah,
And I
yeah.
thought,
Well, you
oh,
proved him wrong.
I, but you know what was beautiful? God bless him. Years later, when I published Homecoming, he must have seen the book and read it because he wrote me back and he said, I was wrong.
Wonderful.
Isn't that wonderful? And
That's wonderful.
I thought, you know, but I also thought, boy, you created a real monster
Yeah.
chasing me. You know, maybe it made me stronger, like they say, if it doesn't break you, it makes you stronger. But
Mm-mm.
boy, it's too bad, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where now I have the hindsight and the insight and the foresight, you know, that I know these things can happen. But to a young writer, I know it can be devastating, you know. That's why I stopped reviewing for the New York Times. I was sent a writer's first book, um, Puerto Rican writer, um, and she had written this book in the foreword. She had explained it was kind of a memoir, somewhat fictionalized. She said that she had written this book, and it was what had saved her in the writing of it from the mental anguish. It was even institutionalized. And I read that. I read the book, and it really needed more work. They
Mm-hmm.
should not have let her release it. But she was the granddaughter of an important figure, and they wanted it out there, and they didn't do her service. And I thought, this young, little, vibrant spirit, all she needs is time, cultivation, nourishment, guidance, mentorship, all of those things. But they released her into the world and she's going to be crushed. So when the editor called me because she hadn't gotten the review and I was, you know, she was worried that I wasn't going to hand it in. I was procrastinating. I said, I can't, I, I can't lie. That's condescending to her. You know, I can't lie to her, but I can't say what I really think
Yes.
and crush her. And she said, well, then it seems you can't write reviews for the New York Times. And I said, I guess I can. And
Yeah.
I've never written a review for a contemporary, never, because I feel like it's,
Can be really, really hard. Yeah.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been too many years a teacher where my work was always to muse and mentor and nurture
And
young
bring up,
talent.
yeah.
Yeah, because I was writing stuff and along the way someone saw something worthy in it that now I go back and read it. I said, really? They saw potential. They saw in you what you didn't yet even maybe believe in
Mm-hmm.
yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I have a little game for us. Do you
Okay.
want to play it? Yeah, it's
Sure.
called
Sure.
Rapid Fire. I'm gonna ask quick questions and you just answer the first thing that comes to your mind.
Okay.
Okay? Poetry or fiction?
Poetry.
English or Spanish?
Spanglish.
Morning writing or night writing?
Morning, especially in old age.
One Spanish word that English simply can't replace.
Ah, oh, wow. So many of them, but caught me by surprise. Well, I talk about one, um, but that's not an emotional core one. Um, well, I mean, a simple one, gracias.
Hmm.
To me, gracias has grace in it.
Grace. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not thanks, it's
Yep.
gracias,
Giving grace. Yeah.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
beautiful.
But there's so many, and of course, I'm I'm blanking out. I even have a little piece that I write about of missing words. And oh, something that I really miss that Spanish does is how you can add ito to a
Ito, oh,
word.
the little, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, and create it's a cariño, it's a
yeah.
cariñito, you know, you
Endearing, yeah,
endearing, yeah, it's like, a way that you can make a word, a love word,
yeah,
by
absolutely.
just that suffix.
That's a good one. One English word you wish existed in Spanish.
We don't have a word in Spanish for insight.
We don't have it in French too.
Yep, yep.
Another one, it's not like really an emotional word, but I've always missed it and I love it in English. It's shallow. We don't have it in French. We say not
Yeah,
deep.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah. So each language comes with its
Mm-hmm.
particular personalities, and there's a beautiful word in Brazilian. Uh, oh, I can't remember.
Saudades, like saudades or something. Is it the word you're talking about? Saudades? No.
What does that one mean? The word I'm thinking of is the one to run your fingers lovingly through someone's hair.
Oh, beautiful. No, that's not
I
that.
think it's called calumfe. I can send it to you later.
Okay,
Yeah, a
please do.
Brazilian word. Yep,
Um, the family storyteller or the family secret keeper?
the family storyteller.
A poem that changed your life.
A poem that changed my life. Well, the poem that I reference in recitation, we all would have to recite for company,
Mm-hmm.
my mother's friends, when they came over. And we each had a signature poem. We knew several, but each one of us had one that was our special poem. And mine was Rubén Darío,
Mm.
Margarita de Baile. And a little part of it is the epigram of the collection,
Yes.
Visitations. And it's about a little girl who is a little princess, and she's very naughty. And she runs away from the palace and goes up in the sky to cut a star from the heavens for herself. So she wants the star that she's seen, and she has to come back home, and she hides it in her chest. And when she comes back, the king sees her and says, "Where have you been? And what is that shining in your chest?" And she couldn't lie. She said, "I went in search of my star to cut from the infinity, of the sky." And it's, to me, in a nutshell, that's what I did by becoming a writer.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's beautiful. A book every young writer should read.
Oh dear. A book every young writer should read. Well, a book that really helped me is Letters to a Young Poet by Rilke.
Mm-hmm.
That was a wonderful book, because it talked about the writing life as a way of life, as a way of being, not a way of achieving. Um, it's about the seeking. The important thing is not to solve the questions, not to find the answers, but to live the questions. And
Mm.
that relief, that was such a relief. And then reading. There's so many
Read, read,
teachers
read.
out there. Yeah. You read something that stirs you. And I still do it. I fall in love with a writer, and then I read everything that writer has written. Everything. That writer's my teacher, because I'm
Mm-hmm.
no longer in school, but I have a library. I have many, many teachers around
Books,
me.
books, books. Yeah. A word you love.
A word I love. English or Spanish?
Mm.
Well, in Spanish, and this is a word that I could say as a word that I miss in English, is inquietude.
Inquiétude. Yeah, we had it
Inquietude.
exists. It exists in French.
Yes.
Inquiétude. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, it's just quiet that has been stirred somewhat.
Yes.
Inquietude, even the way it sounds.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Does it exist in English? Inquietude? No.
Disquiet, you can say, but that's more
Yeah,
like
but
a
it's not,
negative
yeah.
thing. Inquietud is like a pebble in your shoe, you
Mm-hmm.
know. Yeah.
It's beautiful. Which Alvarez sister are you the most like today?
Which of the Alvarez sisters
Are you the most
uh,
like today?
are the ones I wrote in The Four Girls?
Mm-hmm.
I'm all of them. I'm
You're
all of them. And now that we lost my older sister,
I know.
I feel like sometimes I don't want to do something and I think, well, now I'm the oldest and I have to do this. I don't want to take that plane and go to this sister's, party but, you know, I'm the oldest. I have to take care of the others. So, and sometimes they get, I was just over visiting my sister, actually going to her husband's memorial service, and she said, "Stop worrying about me," because there was a tornado watch, and she said, "I don't care if it comes, it doesn't come." She said, "You're such a bossy," and I never could, I would have let my big sister take care of that one. But, of managing everything. And now I feel like, no,
You're wearing the
I gotta
hat now.
do that. Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
If your younger self met you now, would what would she what would surprise her most? Sorry. If your younger self met you now, what would surprise her most?
I would say that I finally got that star. That would surprise her. She
Oh,
didn't
that's
believe it would
beautiful.
ever, she would ever, didn't believe. But the other thing is, she would be surprised. She would say, haven't you grown, haven't, haven't you grown sure of yourself? Don't you have answers now? And I would have to say, oh, darling, there are no set answers. And it's always, you know, to stay open is to stay with a clean windshield, um, and not with a thick one that protects you, not with a bulletproof. It's got to still be able to hit you, the world and its beauty and its terrors and its pain and its joy, all of it. And I would, the younger self would think, oh, now she's impervious, or now she knows. You got your star, but the star is no protection. It just helps you light the thorny path that you're traveling. And that Machado poem that, goes, caminante no hay camino, el camino se hace al andar. A traveler, there is no path. The path is made by walking.
Mm,
The younger self would think, well, didn't you find the path? Oh, there is no, I have to keep walking for the path ahead to form.
beautiful. On that note, do you have anything else to add or something you want to talk about before I close our beautiful interview?
Well, I just want to say, Anaïs, oh, thank you so much for this. And, the way we keep writing, even when we are silent or when we go into the silence, is when voices like you are singing to us across that porous film. So I wish you, you know, I don't know, it's how do you do this? A blessing, a blessing to
Julia,
you
you're
as
gonna
an
make me cry.
artist,
Stop
as
it.
an artist, as an artist, and to Calyx. Oh my goodness. Um, Thank you for blessing us, all of
Yes,
us,
exactly.
for having big enough lap for all of us to crawl and for some of us to crawl under your skirts and be protected. So thank you so much to all of you.
Thank you so much, Julia, for being with us and for spending this time and for sharing this beautiful collection. Visitations is now available. I encourage everybody to pick up a copy. And thank you for supporting Calyx and the women in our community. And thank you, Julia.
And call your mothers.
Call your mothers, call your
And if your
families.
mothers are no longer here, call the people who are like mothers to you.
Exactly.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm
Adios.
I'm gonna